changes to the Predators roster, our thoughts on training camp, and a fun Friday game of takes from a hat. All that's coming up on today's Locked On Predators podcast.
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Predators podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are your free daily Nashville Predators podcast. We're a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to kick off this Friday episode with a hello to any first-time listeners joining us, a shout out to our everydayers and to our Locked On Predators insiders who tune in to talk Nashville Predators hockey with us daily. We appreciate your support. We love that we get to spend a little bit of your day with you. I am Ann Kimmel. I am a writer with Penalty Box Radio, and my friends, I have a partner in crime.
You do. I'm Emma Lingen, and I'm the Predators site editor and reporter for the Hockey News.
Well, the Predators roster down to 56. We're going to tell you on today's show who has departed the Music City to head back to their respective teams. We're also going to tell you what we think about their training camp. We're also going to give you our overall impressions of training camp this week from Ford Ice Center, Bellevue. We're going to update you on some of shifts in the groupings, tell you what stood out to us. And friends, it is Fun Friday. That means we are bringing out the greatest piece of hockey swag, the foam 10-gallon hat, to play some takes from a hat in this episode as well. So stick around. It's going to be a fun Friday full of hockey insight and humor. Before we dive into all of that, though, do want to let you know today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, Emma, we had some updates yesterday when it came to the Predators roster. Two that we really liked. One that I feel some angst over have departed the Nashville Predators training camp. One, Hiroki Gojsic, who, as we talked about earlier this week, signed his ELC, had a great rookie camp, great rookie showcase. I think he looked great in training camp as well. And then Andrew Gibson back to Sault Ste. Marie in the OHL as well. Loved what we got to see from him. Kind of walk me through how you feel about their rookie camp, training camps, and what you saw from them.
Yeah, I think that, obviously we got a little bit of an extended look at both of them. They did survive that first kind of round of roster cuts that sent a bunch of guys back to juniors. So they were around for a couple more days, got a little bit more of a look at them. And I think that that's a testament to the fact that Nashville really sees these guys as, key pieces to their future. And I mean, we kind of already knew that about Gibson with, Nashville trading for him in the offseason. They tried to trade up to get him in the draft and they didn't. So they went and got him this year. So I think, getting an extended look at him, and then Gojsic, like you said, had a great camp, great rookie tournament, signed his entry-level contract. I mean, it's clear that they really like these guys. And so, them ending up going back to juniors, not surprising. The only way they weren't going back to juniors is if they made the NHL roster, because they're not eligible for the AHL yet, which I think we all agreed was a, kind of a long shot. So There's still guys, especially Gibson, could end up joining Milwaukee potentially for a playoff run next year. You never know what's going to happen, not entirely surprising, but, I liked what we saw from them.
I would agree. I was impressed by both of them. The thing that I thought was great about the long look that we got at Andrew Gibson is that we had heard so much about him. We had heard about how the Predators were so interested in him, how they jumped on this trade. We saw what they were willing to give up to get him into the franchise. And I like that we could see the why. We could see very clearly, and I would say on and off ice, we could see the why of Andrew Gibson after this extended look. And I would say the same thing with Gojsic as well. I feel like we see what the Predators saw in him that sort of stood out. Of course, both of them, lots of growing to do, 18 and 19 years old. But it's nice when you get them around a little bit longer and you recognize there is a lot of potential there. And again, we have to go back to don't knock this Predators team, because Barry Trotz has kept a very fertile ground for these prospects and these younger players. And they've continued to not have to expend any of them or many of them to get to where they want to be. So we bid them a fond farewell. We do hope, that we get another look at them. And I like what you said about, what, you just never know. There could be, a late playoff push in Milwaukee. You never know what could happen there as well. Some other things looked a little bit different at camp yesterday. They kind of swapped out the groups, made a couple of adjustments to the groups. And they have one group that tends to be kind of, I like to think of them as the usual suspects, your typical starters for the team. But some of the players that they had with that group yesterday in camp was really interesting. They had the other Johansson, Lucas, Zachary Laro, Lucchini, Nychek, Reed Schaefer, Ufko, and Kevin Wall were in with them too. Anything about any of those players, kind of make you think, okay, there's a reason why we want to see them with the big guns, the usual suspects, or, and part of this straight up is just strictly numbers as well, with the groups. But just curious what your take was on the changes.
Yeah, I think, it's not just looking at who is in that first group. I mean, you look at how many of the usual suspects were in the second group as well.
That's true.
Because
Evangelista,
Tomasino, Cole Smith, like all those guys were in the second group. So it's like, I think it's really one of those things that it's not worth overthinking. Like, it's probably, I would say just to keep us on our toes, but they don't care what we think. I think it's more just about, like you said, just kind of getting a different look at different guys with, different combinations. It allows for some, just mixing it up and seeing what you got. I mean, we saw a new line combination with those new groups. Instead, we had talked about how Zach Laro was skating on a line with Mike McCarron and Cole Smith. Well, Smith was now in the second group, and we got to see Mike McCarron, Colton Sissons, and Zach Laro. So that was fun. It's just we get to see a little bit of everything. So I don't, at this point, it's as long as there are two groups, or I should say, as long as there's more than one group, it's really not worth, reading too much into it, I don't think.
Yeah. When you mentioned Zach Laro, we were just going to kind of transition into what has generally stood out this week. And for me, he is a player who I have been fascinated with this training camp, because Zachary Laro stands out and has stood out in a lot of his opportunities in Nashville when we've gotten to watch him. But this is a different looking Zach Laro in some sense, in that what you're seeing from him and what is catching your attention with Zach Laro right now is strictly skill set. It's speed, it's reading the game, it's playmaking. And I think so often for Laro, and he is a young player, again, sometimes the temperament and energy have been the thing that has stood out for him. And it's been really nice to see the thing that I think that is keeping the coaches wanting to see a little bit more from him. One of the things that I think is sort of keeping our eyes on him is that this skill set is, I think, probably finally getting to be the grade A thing that you see from him, which it should have always been all along. But, the squeaky skill set gets the wheel, or the squeaky skill set gets the attention. Anyway, we're used to paying attention. You're picking up what I'm putting down. Like, when you think about Zachary Laro, you tend to first think about, the fire that he plays with that sometimes burns. But we really have seen none of that. This has strictly been a training camp based on his skill set. And it's been really interesting to watch that.
It has. And I don't disagree with you. I think that a lot of times his antics, let's say,
Great word.
tend to detract from or distract from his actual skill. And I think the playoffs in Milwaukee this last year was really when we got kind of that reminder of like, oh, this guy is more than just, a rat on the ice.
Yes.
It's like he was a first round pick for a reason. And I think we're starting to see that. To be fair, I don't know how much of the antics or the, general hooliganism you're going to see from anyone during training camp.
One would
It's
hope
not,
not. Yeah.
it's not like he's going to be out there getting in fights with guys on his own team during camp. So we'll see. Like, again, I don't mean to say that I don't think that he's shown growth or improvement. It's just like, I think the real test of that will be when we see him actually playing in games this season.
Right. And in the preseason games, we haven't seen much of that. But again, everything in preseason is muted. So let's see what happens in the regular season. But it's been really great to have no distractions from anything except his skill set, which was, like you said, so impressive, especially down the stretch in the playoffs in Milwaukee. Coming up, I owe Emma and one particular Nashville Predator a bit of an apology. I'm going to offer that publicly. And we're going to tell you what Alexandre Carrier had to say about working on special teams. All that's coming up here in just a moment. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Indeed. We are all driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree. Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences. So the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and let them know you heard about Indeed on the podcast. Again, that's Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Today's episode is also brought to you by our great friends at Gametime. If you are looking forward to seeing this very new and exciting Predators team play this season, or you just want to make some great fall memories with friends, you've got to check out the deals at Gametime. Gametime is the fastest and easiest way to get tickets for your favorite sports, music, theater, and comedy. Gametime now has this new feature. It's called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands and thousands of tickets. Right now, Gametime has tickets available for SEC football. They have great seats for Post Malone next month at Nissan Stadium. They also have tickets available for comedian Brad Williams at the Ryman. Gametime has a low price guarantee and the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. All right, Emma, I just want to come on here publicly and say that I feel like I owe an apology to you and to one particular Nashville Predator player. And I don't feel like I have wronged you and this player, significantly, but it's been weighing on me this week, especially at training camp. And so I just want to apologize to Brady Shea and to you, because you have said it all along that Brady Shea is going to be a huge difference maker for the Nashville Predators. And my friends, I am here to tell you that while I didn't dismiss that or doubt it, I certainly overlooked it. And Brady Shea is the ultimate not today Satan defenseman. And he has looked fantastic at training camp. Fantastic.
I tried to tell you, had a front row seat to the guy. I had a front row seat to the guy when I was in Carolina. He was fantastic with them too. And I will say, just go easy on yourself, because I think if you were signed as a free agent in the same or on the same day as Steven Stamkos or Jonathan Marchessault, much less both of them, I think you're probably going to get overlooked by a lot of people. So don't feel bad. I don't think you're the only one. But I am glad that, that's starting to become evident, because he is such a difference maker. I think he's going to be a difference maker on special teams, especially. But one of the things that, we've talked about, Barry Trotz talked about it, especially after the last playoff series against Vancouver, needing size, particularly on defense. He brings that. He's a big guy, but he's also fast and he's skilled. He has an offensive touch. I mean, Brady Shea and Roman Josi together, I get so excited. It's going to be great.
It is such a high skill defensive pairing. Just so complimentary. And again, you have to see it working in the regular season at game speed and all of that. But what we have seen in training camp from Brady Shea just has been so impressive. And I think he and Roman Josi really so far enjoy playing with each other. I think we're seeing some chemistry with them. But you want to talk about a high skilled top defensive pairing. I mean, hats off. You were right. I know you don't like to be wrong, but I hope that you like to just sit there in your rightness and be right, because all this week that has kind of been the thought in the back of my mind is like, yes, I'm watching Marchessault. Yes, I'm watching Stamkos and, the lines and this and that. But the player who consistently has made me go, oh, it has been Brady Shea.
Yeah.
Love it. Love to see it. Speaking of defense, speaking of special teams, we got a chance to sit down and talk with the Viscount Chihuahua himself, Alexandre Carrier, who Emma and I were saying yesterday leaving camp, I hope he never finds out we call him that.
We'd have some explaining to do.
We'd have some explaining to do. But we got to sit down and talk with Alexandre Carrier, and it was a really great discussion, great insight from him just on some of the defensive depth. That was one of the things that he talked about. He talked especially, I loved this. He was talking about Mark Del Gaizo. And of course, you all know Locked On Mark Del Gaizo right here. But he was saying that he remembers, apparently Alexandre Carrier has an invisible backpack of hockey grudges. He remembers in last year's Gold Star Showcase in Clarksville that Del Gaizo put a big hit on him. And he was like, I was going to get him back. And then I wasn't playing in the Gold Star Showcase, but was just talking about, this is not maybe the bigger size defenseman, but how good he was. Also kind of talking about Ryan Ufko, Andrew Gibson, Tanner Molendyk, just quality defensive depth. But what I loved, and you asked him about this, was just kind of the insight he gave into the change on special teams, which shouldn't be overlooked because this is a big change for the Predators.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about earlier in the offseason, Dan Highnote leaving Nashville. He was the assistant coach that was in charge of the penalty kill. Obviously had a very, underwhelming season on the penalty kill last year. And Alex Carrier is a big part of that unit. And I know that, he, as well as several of the other players, speak so highly of Danny Highnote, as do I. Fantastic coach, fantastic human. but it was clear that something was needed, something different was needed on the power play, or on the penalty kill, rather, on the power play too, but that's another conversation for another day.
Podcast.
That's a whole other can of worms. Yes. But on the penalty kill, it was clear that something else was needed. And I asked him about that today because, okay, Danny Heino's gone, got a new coach in charge of the penalty kill, and Darby Hendrickson. And he kind of mentioned, he's like, yeah, it's different. And then he kind of kept talking. I was like, whoa, how? Like, what exactly are we doing? What are we working on? And the biggest thing that he said was that they were more aggressive. Their focus is on getting more aggressive and more, it sounds like, proactive as opposed to reactive. The penalty kill of the past kind of centered more around blocking shots and getting in front of the net. And, it seems like a little bit more proactive, like actually getting after the puck. It sounds like it fits a little bit more seamlessly with the rest of Andrew Burnett's system that prioritizes puck possession. And I think it was interesting, the insight that Carsey gave us, which was, well, last year in training camp, we were all adjusting to this new coach and new system. Now it's almost like we're doing that again, but specifically on special teams, on the penalty kill, because it was, it's an entirely new system for them to learn. But it sounds like, it's going well and they're adjusting. And I think it does kind of fit his style of play. He was very adamant about wanting to be an important part of that unit again, as he has been in the past, but as a skilled defenseman with some offensive upside, I think that's gonna play very well in this kind of system.
Yeah, I'm excited to get a good look at this penalty kill. And I agree with you. He seemed very enthusiastic about the changes. I think he seemed very interested in being a major part of improving that. And, we've talked about Barry Trotz wants these guys to be more specialized. And you're looking at potentially, Brady Shea being in there, Colton Sissons, Jeremy Lauzon, Alexandre Carrier. This could be one of the smaller areas that makes a big difference for the Predators. It could be a big improvement. So I thought that was great insight from him on, what's going to look a little bit different for the Predators on special teams. Of course, the power play is going to look a little bit different on special teams as well, adding Steven Stamkos and Jonathan Marchessault. But don't know that we're going to see a lot of that in this weekend's preseason games. Of course, the Predators tonight take on Tampa Bay in Tampa. Saturday, going to be here at home against Tampa Bay. Don't know that we are going to see, and this really hurts my heart, I don't know that we're going to see Steven Stamkos. Here was my wish. Here was my kind of hope, is that Stamkos was going to take the ice tonight. And maybe he still will, but it sounds not likely. But here was me. Please put Steven Stamkos on the ice in Tampa Bay in preseason to kind of get those initial emotional jitters out, so that October 29th doesn't roll around and he is hit by, just the emotion of everything. But,
that'd be too easy, Ann.
I know.
That'll be too easy. No, I'm telling you, after what they did for Ryan McDonagh, my goodness. See, we avoided that with McDonagh's first season in Nashville because with preseason, we were supposed to do the home and home the same way we're doing it this year. But the hurricane, I don't remember which hurricane, but one of the hurricanes hit Tampa. So they played both games here in Nashville. So we avoided that with Ryan McDonagh until the actual, first game in Tampa, in which he didn't even play. But they rolled out that red carpet. Like I said, they are going to rename the team the Tampa Bay Lightning. I am positive of it. After what they did for McDonagh.
What else do you do?
Like, seriously, it's like they might have set the bar a little bit too high there. So I think, for the player, for the team, for the marketing department, for the broadcast department, all the stakeholders in this, I think it's more beneficial to have that be as big of a moment as possible. And that will only happen in the regular season. I don't hate that. Hey, I love the way you're thinking. I'm just thinking like someone who has worked for a team for far too long and I think
Yeah.
about these things. But yeah, I think that it's also unlikely considering he traveled. These preseason travel days are long days
They are.
because they fly to the city and back in the same day. They don't spend the night. And so it's a really long day. We saw in the doubleheader against Florida that most of the kind of the big guns did not travel. Your Roman Yossi's, your Philip Forsbergs, etc. We're not there. We did see Stamkos, though.
We
Stamkos
did.
did travel for that one. So it's highly unlikely, in my opinion, that we will see Stamkos traveling for 2 back-to-back preseason games.
Let me just tell you, that's not the way I would have played it emotionally, people. For Steven Stamkos and for myself. Can we just
It's
get
really inconsiderate of
it?
them not to think of you, Anne.
I will
Honestly.
tell you, when we welcomed back Matthias Ekholm, and you all, I mean, like, if you've listened to this podcast, you know that, that's a big one for me. I dreaded and sat there in his first game back just with my stomach churning, thinking, I just want to get through the welcome back video in that moment and get on with it. And I'm like, I don't want to go through that again. I don't want Steven Stamkos to go through that again, especially because you want the Predators to come right out of the gate and not have any distractions. And that game is just going to be, that's just going to be a big game. It just is. But
It is.
nobody asked me. We'll see how that goes, y'all. Just saying. Speaking of how that goes, we're going to let you know how some takes from a hat go coming up here in just a moment. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Friends, it is the most wonderful time of the sports year, and the best place to celebrate is with FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. I know the Tennessee Titans not kicking off the season in a big way, but if you're an NFL fan, you can still kick off your season in a big way with a big return from FanDuel. Whenever you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can go to FanDuel and check out the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. And you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's right, $200 in bonus bets guaranteed with your first $5 bet. So check out that deal and all the action at fanduel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, Emma, I am reaching down and picking up the greatest piece of hockey swag, and I can never quite get it because it's so amazing. The
But that's
10-gallon foam hat.
It can't be contained by such a small screen. You
I know.
just
I don't know how we can be contained with such a small screen, and yet here we are day in and day out.
It's a good point.
Contained. All right.
For the most part.
For the most part. Oh, okay. We're starting off light here. What's your biggest hockey pet peeve?
Oh.
We talked about going to prison. What would you go to prison for? Hockey prison for? What would you fight to the death for? Against?
I feel like you should give me yours first because I feel like you have one at the ready.
Oh, I do. Embellishment.
Oh, yeah.
I was a theater major, y'all. Do not punish people for being big and loud, especially, like, I get embellishment if there's not a penalty. But if there is a penalty and someone responds with flair, do not punish them. I can't stand that. I absolutely can't stand that. I think it is so ridiculous.
Yeah, I would agree that embellishment should be canceled out if there's actually a penalty.
Yes.
If you're trying to make it look like a penalty when it's not, then okay.
Yeah, that's bad acting. Go sit.
Yeah.
But,
that's a good one. I would say refs who are too picky and kick like everyone out of the face-off circle until they finally decide that they can move on. Like it seems like a power trip to me. It's like, let's get him moving. It's like everyone is gonna flinch or twitch a little bit, like, and some guys just have that really itchy trigger finger. And it's just like, all right, dude, come on. At some point, we got to just play the game. I'll give you one. I'll let you kick one guy out of the face-off circle. But anytime it's more than one, it's like, come on. Let's just get it going. That would probably
if I had a nickel for every time under my breath I muttered, just drop the puck last season for that reason, I mean, I would pay half Steven Stamkos' salary. I would pay all of Brady Shea's salary.
Yeah.
So it's an apology.
Yes.
That's an apology. Okay. What would a, quote, successful season look like as far as goals and points for Tommy Novak?
Well, I think if we're operating under the assumption that he is going to be the 2C between Jonathan Marchessault, Steven Stamkos, I think for Tommy Novak, at least 50, 55 points. Like, at least. Now, I don't know how high that goal number is going to be, though. That I'm willing to be flexible on, because I think his role on that line is going to be more of a puck distributor than a scorer. So I don't know. I think we're going to see his assist numbers go up more than his goal numbers. But I think as a second line center between those two guys, I'm going to say 55 points at least.
Yeah. I love that. And I absolutely agree with you. He had 18 goals in 71 games last season, 45 points. I'm okay if he is not a 20 goal scorer next year. I'll sleep fine at night, y'all. But I am with you. If you are centering Marchessault and Stamkos, as we've seen, with pretty good consistency in camp, I would love to see that points total go up. Yeah. And I wonder if it does, will we have to start calling him Thomas Novak?
You're giving me PTSD right now, because that was his name in the NHL roster system when he first came up to the Preds. So my first season with the Preds, he was called up from Milwaukee, and he was Thomas Novak. Like that was his name. That was his name on the roster. But he went by Tommy. Obviously, everyone knows him as Tommy. And so as the person who had to code and program everything on the back end of the team website, we had it set up so that, like, just to streamline things, if you type the player's name, it would automatically link to their player page in whatever story or page you were typing. So it just made things easier. Every time I had to go back in and back end code Tommy Novak's name, because I was like, I can't call him Thomas Novak. This just sounds so ridiculous.
People would say, like, where did you pick up the new guy?
I know. So I was like, I remember asking people, and they're like, well, just say Thomas. I'm like, I can't do that. I'm sorry. That's not an option. So I would just say Tommy. And then I would have to go back and manually link to his player page, because I'm like, I'm not doing that. I'm not calling him Thomas. Can't do it.
No. Now, if he gets 60 points, I'll call him Sir Thomas.
I was just going to say Sir Thomas Novak.
Sir Thomas I could do.
Viscount.
He could be a duke.
Yes.
Check yourself, Tommy Novak.
The Earl of Novak.
The Earl of Novak. Here we go. What or who has been the biggest surprise in training camp or preseason for you? I kind of already shared mine, Brady Shea.
Yeah. See, that wasn't a surprise for me, because
I know
you don't like to be wrong. I think I'm going to go with Ozzy Weisblatt. And it's not so much that I expected little of him. It was more that I just didn't know quite what to expect. And we've seen him kind of skating a lot and practicing a lot with that more NHL ready group. And it kind of gives you, like, I don't know if he's going to make the opening night roster, but you could very easily see him being, next man up if someone gets hurt. I think he's one that has been kind of, you're starting to see kind of what you said with Andrew Gibson, where we got to see the why. And now we're like, oh, this is why. We're actually getting an extended look at Ozzy Weisblatt. And he's tough. He's physical. He can hold his own with those NHL guys. So I think for this guy, it's only a matter of time.
Yeah. He has been a really exciting player to watch. I would agree with that. Okay. This one might go long, but I'm just curious about this. So Ryan Johansson and the Philadelphia Flyers are not seeing eye to eye on the whole contract termination situation. If you were the arbitrator, what information would factor into your decision?
All of it. All of the information. I don't know. It's hard because so little about this is known right now.
Yeah. A lot of speculation, but not a lot of for sures.
Philadelphia, what we do know is that Philadelphia has, alleged a breach of contract, and that's why they want to terminate it early. And obviously because it is a contract, they can't do that without probable cause, without repercussions. And so on one hand, you think Philadelphia's got to be pretty sure that there was in fact a breach of contract to do that. And we also know that the Flyers have kind of come out and said, hey, we have receipts and we have evidence and we have information, and trust us, you don't want to let this get out in the open. And so I think that it's kind of a scare tactic a little bit, but at the same time, it's Johansson's right. It is his right to dispute the contract termination. And I think that, I think that as far as the information, I want to hear from Philadelphia exactly. I want you to point to me in the contract and show me exactly the line, the sentence, the word, the comma that he, breached in that contract, and argue to me why. And then, I would kind of have to go from there. Again, I've said this before. I think the most likely end result here is that they end up settling for some undisclosed amount and they go their separate ways, because that's usually what happens in these situations.
Yeah. I will say this, there's been a lot of kind of murmurings about, oh, it could be this, because you talk about, it does appear that the Flyers have quote unquote receipts. The one thing that bothers me is that, I've heard people speculate oh, there's video from his wedding where he was dancing at his wedding. And if he has this bad, it's alleged to be a hip injury, which, let me just say, Emma and I have mad respect for hip injuries, having dealt with them, dealing with them.
Locked on hip injuries here.
That's exactly it. It will irk me if their receipts are he was dancing at his wedding, because you know what? As somebody who spent almost 3 years straight on crutches, 3 hip surgeries, a surgery year after year after year, trying to get something fixed. When you have big moments like that, you push through things to enjoy them. And that will irk me if that's their receipts.
Not only that, but when you're dealing with an injury for that long, at a certain point, you kind of just adapt and get used to it. And I'm not saying that's a good thing, but as evidenced by the fact that I, as we speak, am walking around on a fractured hip. Doesn't sound like something I probably should be doing. And
just
have
FYI.
been for months. And it's oh yeah, no, actually walking and normal activities probably aren't supposed to hurt this much, but you just kind of get used to it. And you said, it's you're not going to let it completely put your life on hold.
Yes. You're not going to say, hey, this is my wedding reception, I'm going to sit the chicken dance out. You're doing the chicken dance.
Yeah.
You just are.
So I think, I don't know. I would have to imagine that it's got to be more than that, though. When it comes to the contract breach stuff, I think they might, because that's how these situations are, they might throw that in as a little extra kindling on the fire, but I feel like there's got to be something else.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch. And of course, Nashville Predators fans need to keep their eye on that situation because there is a little bit of coin that is involved with the Nashville Predators, depending on how this situation goes. So we will keep our, eye on that situation and let you know when there's any news of any sort of resolution to that as well. This weekend, 2 preseason games against the Tampa Bay Lightning. When we get back on Monday, we'll talk about what we saw and how we felt about the performance and what the roster is going to look like, because it's going to be very different next week at training camp, y'all. Before we sign off on this Friday, Emma, let everyone know where they can find you and your work.
You can find me on social media at Emma_Lingen, and you can find my work at the Hockey News.
And you can find me on social media at AnnK_Mama on Ice. You can find my work at Penalty Box Radio as well. That is going to do it for this week's episodes of the Locked On Predators podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are going to be back on Monday with an all-new episode. We'll see you then.